There's a version of World War II history most people never hear about. Not the battles, not the politics, but the quiet war fought in kitchens, backyards, and ration lines. Ordinary people had to stretch almost nothing into something that could keep a family alive. And, they got incredibly good at it. The truth is, many of those forgotten survival meals weren't just desperate improvisations. They were smart, efficient, and in some cases, nutritionally brilliant. These days, when food prices spike or supply chains break down, these same methods suddenly become relevant again. This isn't nostalgia. This is practical knowledge that still works. And if you stick with this, you'll walk away knowing how to turn scraps into real meals, just like they did when it mattered most. How ration cooking forced people to rethink what food really is. During World War II, rationing meant strict limits on meat, sugar, butter, and flour. People couldn't rely on standard recipes anymore. Instead, they redefined meals around availability rather than preference. One of the most effective strategies was substitution cooking. When meat was scarce, lentils, beans, and even ground nuts were used to mimic both texture and protein content. A common wartime dish was lentil loaf, often mixed with breadcrumbs and whatever vegetables were available. The key lesson here is how they layered flavour. They used onions, herbs, and small amounts of fat to create depth. Today, you can apply this by replacing half the meat in dishes like meatballs or burgers with lentils or beans. It cuts costs, extends your food supply, and still delivers a satisfying meal. Why soups and stews became the backbone of survival nutrition. Soup wasn't just comfort food, it was strategy. Families learned that slow-cooked stews could extract maximum nutrition from minimal ingredients. Bones, vegetable peels, and stale bread all had a place in the pot. One widely used method was perpetual soup, where a pot stayed on low heat for days, constantly replenished with new scraps. Nothing went to waste. This approach ensured a continuous food source with minimal fuel use. You can recreate this today by saving vegetable scraps in your freezer, carrot ends, onion skins, celery leaves, and using them to make broth. Add grains like barley or rice to make it more filling. The result is a meal that costs almost nothing, but sustains you for days. How wartime bread recipes stretch flour further than you'd think possible. Flour was heavily rationed, so traditional bread recipes had to evolve. One of the most effective adaptations was the use of fillers like mashed potatoes, oats, or even grated vegetables. Potato bread became especially popular because it stayed moist longer and required less flour. The starch from the potatoes also made it more filling, which was critical when food was scarce. You can apply this today by adding mashed potatoes or oats into your bread dough. It reduces your reliance on flour while improving texture and shelf life. In a long-term survival situation, that's a major advantage. Why were mock meals more than just clever substitutes? Well, during the war, cooks really became masters of illusion. They created mock versions of expensive or unavailable foods using cheap everyday ingredients. Take mock apple pie, for example. It used crackers, sugar, and a bit of acid like vinegar or lemon juice to replicate the taste and texture of apples. But, this wasn't just about taste, it was psychological. Maintaining a sense of normalcy truly mattered. People needed familiar meals to stay grounded, especially in uncertain times. Today, this idea sort of translates into flexibility. If you can't get a certain ingredient, just focus on replicating its function, whether that's texture, acidity, or sweetness, instead of the exact item. It's a mindset shift, really, and it makes you far more resilient in the kitchen. How did simple preservation methods keep food available year-round? Well, refrigeration was quite limited, so preservation was absolutely essential. Folks relied on drying, pickling, and fermenting to extend the life of their food. Vegetables were often pickled in vinegar, while fruits were dried or turned into jams with minimal sugar. One practical technique was quick pickling. Vegetables like cabbage, carrots, and cucumbers were soaked in a vinegar solution and stored for weeks. This not only preserved them, but also added vital nutrients during those long winter months. You can start doing this easily, honestly. Just slice vegetables, boil vinegar with a bit of salt, pour it over, and store in a sealed jar. Within a few days, you've got a preserved, flavorful food source that doesn't even require refrigeration if stored properly. Why were fats and calories treated as survival currency? People during the Second World War understood something many overlook today. Calories truly equaled survival. Fats, in particular, were highly valued because they provided concentrated energy. Drippings from cooked meat were never wasted. They were always saved and reused for cooking, adding both flavor and those essential calories. Even small amounts made a big difference. In modern terms, this means rethinking waste. Save cooking oils, reuse them when it's safe, and try incorporating calorie-dense foods like nuts or seeds into your meals. In a crisis, efficiency really does matter more than variety. So, how can you start applying these lessons right now? Start small. Make one pot of soup using scraps you'd normally throw away. Try baking bread with a portion of oats or potatoes mixed in. Replace part of your meat with legumes in a familiar recipe. These aren't extreme changes. They're just practical upgrades rooted in proven history. The real takeaway from Second World War survival meals isn't just the recipes. It's the mindset, resourcefulness, adaptability, and a refusal to waste anything. Those principles are just as powerful today as they were back then. If you found this valuable, make sure to subscribe and share this with someone who appreciates real, practical history. Because, the knowledge that kept people alive then might be exactly what helps someone get through tough times now.